Let's bring you some expert analysis of what is happening. Hussein Ibish is with me this morning from Washington. He is a senior resident scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute. Welcome to our program. Delighted to have you as a guest today.
Really glad to be with you. I must say, this is an invasion, not any. Let's not use euphemisms. This is an invasion.
An invasion, not incursion. So Israel is describing it as limited, localized, and targeted.
Yeah. Right. That's always how these things start, right? So the last big one in 1982 was limited, localized, and targeted until it wasn't. And it built on itself. There was mission creep and mission gallop. And in the end, Israel had an 18-year occupation of southern Lebanon, the direct result of which was the creation of Hezbollah. So in other words, what we're looking at is the first stage of what is a very strong echo of exactly the same dynamics that produced the organization that is now bedeviling Israel so much.
In the initial discussions about what is happening now in southern Lebanon, what we've heard from Israel is that there's no intention of occupying. Yeah. Do you think it's not learned from those lessons of the 80s and to a lesser degree in 2006?
It may or may not have. It doesn't appear to have, because if it did, it would be behaving a bit differently. But we'll see. I mean, it is just very difficult to actually keep things localized and targeted in this way, because what ends up happening is if you promise, a certain level of security to people by chasing forces away, and they can come back into a given area, then the whole operation doesn't really make sense. So it has sort of a repetition or permanency built into the idea. Then the other thing is that once you're somewhere, there's always a guy over the next hill who's trying to kill you. So then you have two choices. You can either hunker down and then you get mired in a quagmire, or you can go after that guy. And then you have an expanded occupation. You end up going further and further north. It becomes very, very difficult to withdraw without appearing to hand victory to the insurgents, or it will be called cowardly, self-defeating, pointless by lots of critics. And if Israel has learned from its previous encounters with Lebanon, then everyone will be much better off. But I really am very skeptical of that.
Okay, clearly putting your finger on one of the main risks for Israel at this point. I want to talk about other players in all of this. Lebanon, the people, the government itself. What are the consequences for Lebanon in this?
It's dire for Lebanon. I mean, once again, they've been dragged into a conflict by Hezbollah, which is, a non-state actor that, because it has this independent militia, private army, is capable of making decisions of war and peace on behalf of the whole country, that influence and decide things for the country without consulting the government, without consulting the people, and just making these decisions, in a bunker in secret. So it's a dire thing. The Lebanese economy crashed several years ago when it became clear that the banking system and the elites had literally stolen all the money in the country and shipped it abroad over decades of pilfering and theft and fraud. And it hasn't had a president for well over a year because of political intransigence by Hezbollah, which will not accept any candidate that they don't like, and they can't get through their own candidate. The whole country is sort of crippled by its own internal problems. And then on top of which you have Hezbollah, which is a kind of, I would say, a fatal cancer to the Lebanese state, in the sense that the Lebanese state cannot successfully reconstitute itself as a viable centralized country where there's a kind of a private army running around making all kinds of decisions. Hezbollah does have to pretend to operate within the framework of Lebanese politics and conciliation, but in fact, it really does what it wants.
Hezbollah operating in Lebanon, but of course tied so closely to Iran. And I'm wondering, there's an awful lot of writing right now about Iran, and wondering why Iran has had such a tepid response to the attacks thus far, the decapitation of Hezbollah leadership, for example. What do you make of the lack of response thus far? Are you still anticipating something more aggressive, or how do you see it?
Yeah, I'm not anticipating something more aggressive. I think you put your finger on the core to understanding much of what's going on. Because, Hezbollah is not independent of Iran, the way Hamas is or the Houthis in Yemen are. They're in alliances with Iran. Hezbollah is a creature of Iran, right? It was founded after the Israeli invasion and occupation began in 1982 because Iran saw an opportunity. The Shiites of Lebanon were being badly abused by Israel. They wanted to resist. There was no force, so Iran helped them create one. So they really do control that thing in a very intimate way. And Nasrallah, the slain leader, was personally close to Khamenei. Why is Iran doing nothing? And it's not just doing nothing. It is preventing Hezbollah from using its own military. Hezbollah has really considerable missile and rocket capabilities. At the beginning of this conflict, they had 150,000 missiles with precision guidance. And Israel claims to have destroyed half of those. That's surely a wild exaggeration. But even if they had, that's 75,000 major rockets and missiles left. It could be targeted anywhere in Israel, at Haifa, at the Dimona nuclear reactor, at anywhere they wanted, and with the potential to overwhelm the Iron Dome missile defense system. So why has even Hezbollah not acted like that? Because Iran wants Hezbollah to restrain itself. That arsenal is not for defending Hamas and Gaza. It's not even for defending Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's for defending Iran. It's a deterrent against an attack by Israel or the United States on Iran and its nuclear facilities. That's what Hezbollah and its arsenal are for from the Iranian perspective. And therefore, Hezbollah hasn't even defended itself. And I can tell you, there are a lot of Hezbollah supporters and even fighters who are shocked and dismayed to discover that this great alliance and unity and harmony is strictly a one-way street, and that Hezbollah and Lebanon exist to serve Iran, and Iran has no obligation, it feels no obligation to defend its so-called allies.
On the subject of allies, on the other side of things, Israel and the United States, we've heard from U.S. President Joe Biden on this, saying he's aware of what Israel is doing, and he's comfortable, well, the quote is, "I'm comfortable with them stopping." He wants that 21-day ceasefire that he and France, and you see Israel going ahead despite that. And I'm wondering what that signals to you. Does it signal a diminution of any sort of outside diplomatic pressure that Israel will continue to do what Israel sees is in its best interest in self-defense?
Here's what it signals. It signals that we are 5 weeks away from an American election, and the Israelis know that this time period is their window of maximum impunity. They can do just about anything they want with regard to their neighbors, no matter how damaging it is to U.S. interests and how contrary it is to everything the Biden administration has been telling them, begging them, pleading with them for a year not to do. They're doing it right on the eve of this election, and there's no reason structurally that they couldn't have done it earlier or later. They're doing it now because now is the time when they can get the least criticism and the least pushback. The U.S. has absolutely no interest in Israel doing this. It's very risky for the United States. It's exactly what the United States wanted to avoid. The U.S. policy after October 7th was focused on one overriding goal: prevent the Gaza war from spreading, and especially into Lebanon. And now it has, almost entirely because Israel wants it to spread. The Iranians and Hezbollah didn't want a war at all because they want to retain Hezbollah's strength to fend off any attack on Iran. They didn't want to get involved in a war for Gaza or Hamas. They don't care about those. What they're now in the situation where the United States has almost no ability to influence Israeli decision-making under current circumstances, but the United States will be bound by what Israel does. If Israel drags the region into a conflict involving Iran, the United States will feel bound to come to Israel's defense if it needs it. And so it's really an extraordinary example of the tail wagging the dog here, honestly. This is a weird relationship at times.